We've got joining us now Mr. Scott Whitlock. Scott's the president and CEO at Flexware Innovation, and he's a tech partner at Summit Smart Farms. Scott Whitlock's vision for agriculture grew out of his passion to strengthen manufacturing throughout America. He grew up in rural Indiana and saw firsthand how a manufacturing firm becomes the lifeblood of a community. And today he's here to share with us how technology in his rental car matters to pig production. So let's bring Scott up to the main stage. And Scott, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Dr. Johnson. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, your audio sounds very good, Scott.
Okay, I'm getting a little bit of feedback here, but I'll see if I can turn mine down. Okay.
You sound good on our end, no problems.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. And special thanks to the Summit Smart Farm team for just including Flexware as their tech partner. We've really enjoyed working with John and Valerie and Ed at Summit Smart Farms and just are really excited about the future. So, yes, we're going to talk about rental cars in just a second, but I'll tell you a little bit about myself first. I am the president and founder of Flexware Innovation. We're a 25-year-old technology integrator that's mostly been focused in manufacturing, particularly large enterprise manufacturing companies. But I did grow up on a small hog farm. And most people laugh when I say this. My mom and dad bought this 70-acre farm in the late 70s. And someone told them, hey, you should raise pigs because you can make a lot of money. And yeah, that usually gets a laugh in this industry with this audience. And they learned the hard way. Interest rates in the early 80s were 22%, and my dad switched from pig farming to pressure washing, another industry that this industry knows well. But I was a 10-year 4-H member. There's a picture there, me proudly wearing my vice grips on my belt, showing my pigs at the local fair with my Master Mix hat on. So I'm excited to be back in this industry in a much, much different way. But at least I have some background here to appreciate this industry. A little bit about Flexware. Again, I mentioned 25-year-old business. Some statistics here on some of the enterprise manufacturing customers we've worked with. We're 104 full-time employees, with about 80 of those folks being engineers delivering solutions into those manufacturing environments. One of the cool things that we've gotten to do over our history is deploy technology globally. So that means multilingual. That means understanding how to integrate into an enterprise back end for these large firms. And I think really sets us up well to be Summit Smart Farms technology partner for thinking about how these technologies integrate into these pig producers. So Dr. Johnson, you mentioned the title of my talk was how the technology in my rental car matters to pig production. And I had this experience when I was coming up with this talk a few weeks ago, where I went to the Emerald aisle at National, and I was looking for the car to rent. And I would have liked to have been in a midsize or something, but I ended up with this little Nissan Kick. Didn't even know that model existed, but you know, it had cruise, it had Bluetooth, it had a lot of the modern technologies. And so I grabbed it from the aisle and left. And as I'm driving around, leaving the rental car place, I'm merging onto the highway, and this thing jams on the brakes and, scares me to death, honestly, because I didn't realize that this little entry-level car had that level of technology in it. And I later, when I got done renting, I looked this thing up. The MSRP on this car was $20,000, but it had lane avoidance, lane departure warnings. It would shake the steering wheel. It would highlight something on the dash if I got over the white line. It obviously, had enough sensors to jam on the brakes. So what does this mean to pig production? It means that this technology is coming. We've been hearing it all day, with a lot of wonderful technologies and capabilities that are showing up in barns. But I want to take what we've learned from manufacturing and overlay that on top of what we're learning, what we know about pig production. And I guess even as Michael did there a little bit, sort of pump the brakes on what we understand, the hurdles are to get all the way to a 5.0 revolution. So I want to give a little credit to my friend John Dyke, who runs as the CEO of this institute called SESME, which is hosted out of UCLA. This is the Clean Energy Smart Manufacturing Innovation Institute. I think government entities and colleges like to make big, long acronyms. But I'm going to use a couple slides here because they're super relevant to what we're dealing with in technology and pig production. So folks in my world will understand and recognize this graphic. This graphic is a real live taxonomy, and by taxonomy I mean just a diagram of the systems in a real manufacturing environment. So think of a big automotive firm, and every one of these rectangles that you see here represents a system. And a system has the little silver cylinders here as a database, and the little monitors, they all have application interfaces, they all have their own code. And the next little diagram here, we will all recognize these. We see these in control rooms and conference rooms across pig producers. They're the type of reports that we put up to show how we're doing, right? And what the performance is. But the challenge here is all of these systems have to talk to all of these other back-end systems, and you get data for these reports from different colored boxes here. And this is the reality that we live in manufacturing, and it's the reality we live in pig production. There's all these complicated communication paths. And so when we talk about AI and big data and machine learning and the ability to grab some of this information and make smart insights and good decisions and alarms and alerts, we also have to realize that we're dealing with this kind of reality. Another slide from SESME that I love just talks about the industry revolutions that we are in today. So I know we've named this the 5.0 pig revolution. And I asked Swine what was behind that, because we're really just entering the fourth industrial revolution, and we're just starting there. And I think in my world, we see that, yes, there's a lot of cool things with IoT and devices, and we've been automating factories for really 40 years. And a lot of that automation has come through the barn controllers and things that are in pig production today. But the reality is, throw that last little colorful slide up there, is that let me go back. Yeah, so we have the same conundrum here as we start Industry 4.0, in that all of these systems still exist, and it has us stuck in this third industrial revolution, trying to get some momentum into that fourth industrial revolution. And so those systems, they're proprietary, they're closed, the data is locked in those. And one of the things I'm going to ask producers to think about as you think about smart barns is, what does that back end stack look like for you? And as we put these cool tools in the barns, what do we have to communicate with on the back end to make this data actionable and actually tie in and get a real ROI out of it? And just again, talking about Industry 4.0 in the manufacturing space, the idea that SESME has is to democratize this, and actually through APIs, through simpler interfaces, through sharing of best practices. And I loved some of what we've been talking about today, some of these interoperable gateways and APIs, and the ability for, nobody's going to solve this problem by themselves. We're going to have lots of sensor companies that we want to pull data in from. We're going to have feed management companies. We're going to have operational things out there that we want to pull data in, like MetaFarms. We're going to have financial systems and closeout that we want to pull information in. So that's kind of the overlay from manufacturing, where we'd like to see this go in pig production. There's a cool model that we use in manufacturing, and if you wanted to jot down this acronym, it's the international standard is called ISA 95, but it was invented at Purdue University. This was called the Purdue Reference Model, and it really defines the logical hierarchy of systems within a production environment. So just to briefly talk about each of these levels, level 0 and 1 is really where we have sensors and automation. So think of things like Michael just talked about with barn tools. Think of your AP and SCOVE type systems that are kind of your level 1 automation type systems for the facilities. Level 2 would be your operator interfaces. So again, Michael referenced, pushing a button on the screen and changing a temperature, a set point, or an alarm or something like that. That would be level 2, kind of a human machine interface level. Level 4 might be your financial back-end systems or your meta farms. It could be even some capabilities around like an every pig system. And so those are kind of these different levels, but the level 3 is really the area we started in manufacturing. It's called manufacturing execution systems. And my only MES joke that I have is that the #1 MES system on the planet is really Microsoft Excel spreadsheet. And that exists in pig production as well. As we've heard today, there are reams and reams of Excel spreadsheets where people collect data and do pivot tables and do some analysis and things like that. So there is this gap in production and manufacturing, as well as this gap in pig production that needs to be filled. So what we've done is we've taken this and take a look at overlaying this into the pig production world. And so just some basic little sketches here of both breed to wean and wean to market. This standard talks about business planning and logistics down to operations management and down to that control layer, how to control and predict what's going to happen in these facilities. And so we've started to look at what's the current state for these. Where do things line up in this hierarchy? And this will help us figure out, again, where these gaps are and the types of solutions that we can bring to bear. The standard, if you look at it, goes further into all of the data flows that happen in at that management level. And so you think about work instructions and task management on these farms. You think about what is my recipe for a great environmental setup as these pigs grow in a wean to market type environment? What kind of alarms and alerts and feedback loops do I need back into my back end systems? And so we've started to overlay our product roadmaps along with Summit on these types of thinking. So think about, what do we do in central managed finish? How do we bring work instructions and task manage it into sow farms? Understanding the people dynamics and culture, the people performance correlation. So how does that work and interact? Again, I mentioned task management. It's very important for just delivering, people knowing what to do today, when they're going to get to go home, what are the exceptions, how long should these tasks take, improving that worker experience at the slat level, so folks, we don't, so we can address the turnover issue within the industry. Utilizing technologies, we've talked about how large some of these sites are, and just knowing if people are on task or not. Can we track some of the task management through some automated location tracking? And then integrating into a lot of the sensors and smart technologies that we've talked about today. How do we move towards a closed loop control so we understand? I think Michael just gave that example, leaving the water on. How could we fix that through actually talking to a controller back in the barn and shutting that water off so somebody doesn't have to go back and do that when they arrive home, or it's just automatically shut off for them. So with all of that, I just have a couple slides here just to challenge the revolution. I don't mean to be the wet blanket to burst the 5.0 bubble, but I think we're probably somewhere more in the 3.1 revolution in pig production, just knowing, and I think, who was it? Brian Parker from MetaFarm said, he gets asked the question, why is the pork industry further behind? And he said, if you got a minute, we can have that conversation. And we have the same conversation in manufacturing. And I would wager to say, with the years I've been involved with Summit, is that pork producers are probably a little bit behind manufacturers in terms of their how far they are with implementing this technology. And so again, I think we're probably more like 3.1, but I love the baby steps. I love the music in the pocket that BJ talked about. And the point there is to get value at every step. Nobody's going to have a one size fits all. We're magically going to be all the way to done. And you can just buy the smart farm thing and it has all of your capabilities. We're going to do the iPod thing like BJ talked about as an industry. The other thing I've learned, and again, from my perspective in manufacturing, is that to challenge and think about some of these business models. So in our 25 years in business in this MES space, sometimes it just takes faith to go implement and try. And we've heard a lot of great stories today about R&D farms, about pilot installations and capabilities, and you'll learn a lot through those, but they take time and investment. And so, my encouragement to the industry is that we do that collectively, continue to make those investments. The other thing we've learned is, it's easier for this industry to justify an ROI based on a capital philosophy and spreadsheets that they're used to investing that way. If I build this sow barn, I know what the ROI is. I know what the return is. I feel confident making that investment. If I build this truck wash, if I build this, whatever it is, the capital models and the investment mentality is the way it's been for a while. And that kind of ties in my third bullet, which is thinking about this software as a service, or this as a service kind of philosophy. One thing I love about this industry is we have these closeouts, and we have, kind of a financial transaction where everybody gets paid, or, a lot of transactions happen based on closeout. And that is kind of an as a service model. It's a per pig type of a model, which lends itself to thinking more about these as a service models. And when you start mixing in monthly costs and, other things like that, I think we're going to have to kind of reconcile all those business models as we move forward. The other big thing for us, because we see this IoT explosion in manufacturing, is context, context, context. Sensors only tell part of the story. And I've seen this numbers of times where there'll be a new company come out in manufacturing, and they want to put a sensor on machines, and they want to see how that machine is running. And my first question to that technology company is, do you know what shift you're on? Do you know what product you're running? Do you know what material you're running? Do you know how it ran last week? Do you know the parameters for the setup for the machine? And if you don't have all that context, it's very, very difficult to make any more of a determination than just the machine's running or not running, or, you might get in a little predictive analytics that, a bearing's going bad, or it's maybe not running as fast as it was yesterday, but there's a ton of context required. And so one challenge is to think about what data do you really need to make decisions. And Michael just touched on it a second ago, and Dr. Johnson, during your questions about that geofencing and that looking in the rear view mirror. If you're going to make predictive decisions, what would you need to make those? If you're going to make kind of retrospective or those types of decisions, what would you need? And then start to think about, well, okay, well then how do I need to plug into this whole ecosystem to make that happen? And then we've touched on this a little bit today too, but this just puts another exclamation point on it, since my slides were pre-prepared, is the infrastructure and things like LoRa and things like cellular, and making this easy for the producers. I tell John, it's got to be just as easy as calling up Comcast and getting your cable installed. And if they don't have the last mile there, they get the last mile done, and they make it easy for you. And if there's a service call, somebody comes out and swaps out a sensor, swaps out a gateway, swaps out whatever. And it's got to be that easy for the producers. And then on the back office, just like with the taxonomy drawing that we had from the complex manufacturing company, is really taking a look at that from your own infrastructure. It doesn't matter the size of producer, from a small family operation to some of the larger enterprise operations, is really understanding your back office taxonomy and taking a look at that technical debt and starting to chip away at it over time. And then, so here's my kind of final takeaways. I mentioned this, but invest the time and money, consolidate the systems. I love the term technical debt because it's real. If producers out there just took a minute and a napkin and started diagramming all the systems, anything that has a database, users, connectivity, logins, and just put your boxes down and start to understand what those are. And then maybe do a little priority ranking or something like that on what's the house that needs to be flipped most? What's the technical debt that needs to be a challenge first? And how can I consolidate these things into something that makes sense? I was talking to a big data analyst the other day, and they made the point that the companies that are going to win in the future are the ones that consolidate and homogenize this data into something that all has the appropriate context. If you go into the cloud with artificial intelligence and big data analysis, and you just shove your 47 systems up there and replicate the data it's going to be a mess. It is not going to be something that is you're magically going to point your data tools at and get actionable information out of. You have to think about that infrastructure first before you can make good business decisions out of it. And anyway, I said every business will become an information business. How cool is it today that if you need something, you can swipe and buy now on Amazon, and 2 days later it shows up on your doorstep, in some case 1 day. That is because Amazon is an information company. And someday we're going to be there with pig production, where you have an issue in a barn, and you might be able to, through your phone, you might be able to wake up a drone and it can go run and look at that fly, look at that pen, give you immediate feedback, and go sit back down on a charging station. I mean, those are things that are probably going to happen, but producers that are set up to be that information type company are going to be the ones that can take advantage of that. And then I know I'm up to my 20 minutes, so I'll just kind of go through the last few things here quickly. Challenge the status quo. Again, we've talked a little bit about smartphones being on-prem on farms, and I think that's going to come. Compensation plans. I was, just getting back to the turnover and people, loving on people in the barns. I got to witness an RV manufacturer in northern Indiana where they had a unique compensation. It was piecework was their compensation plan, and there was a large Amish communities up there, and so these folks will come to work at 5 in the morning and they'll be done by 11 because they're paid on piecework. And I literally saw 4 Amish guys carry an RV rooftop from one station to the next station while running. And I just couldn't believe the work effort I saw in this facility, but it was because of the way they got paid and kind of what they needed to do to get back to their farms. Obviously, extending your thinking through thought experiments is a really good way of thinking about all the data that you need. Equipping your facilities as they're built, put this technology package in the mortgage, if you will, is a great way to start equipping barns, because we do know barns turn over and new barns get built every year. And then, like we talked about before, this recurring charges into your business model. People forget that connectivity, Michael talked about whatever it is, 40, 50 bucks a month, that costs money. The cloud costs money. Microsoft's pretty proud of Azure, AWS as well, and so those aren't free. Your corporate IT systems have to be overhauled, so you might want to start nicking away at that a little bit. And then when you put tablets and phones on the barns, there's device management, there's replacement costs, there's warranty costs. And if you just start thinking about all these, I think producers need to start figuring out how they're going to use what little margin there is out there to figure out these business models that'll support that type of infrastructure. So Dr. Johnson, with that, that's the end of my content.
Thank you very much, Scott. One of the things you talked about that really resonated with me was when you spent a little time on task management and understanding the amount of time it takes to accomplish tasks at a farm relative to how much time we actually give the employees to do it. And that's a disconnect that I see over and over again, and one that I think we get worse at as systems get bigger and as the decision makers get further away from having ever worked on a farm in their lives. It's easy to say, well, the vet said we need to do this extra biosecurity step, or the vet said we need to change gloves between doing this with every litters, and we add that to the workload, but we aren't adding head counts to the farms. Have you been able to dive into that in any detail, and do you have any examples of kind of eye-opening situations where as you've measured the amount of work we have allocated for people, you found that, oh man, it's not anywhere near what it takes to actually get that stuff done?
Well, we're taking a little bit, to answer your question, we're taking a little bit of a page out of BJ's playbook with, starting with the iPod in your pocket, the music in your pocket. And we think one of the places to start there is in the wean to finish market. And we think task management is probably a better solution in the sow farm. Just there's more tasks, there's more people showing up. But I love John and Valerie from Summit Smart Farms approach. We think one of the ways of valuing people better and loving on them is for them to know when they're going to go home at night, and to walk in the morning, understand this is what I have to do today. This is what a good day looks like, right? And the idea of either coming back, to the huddle room and seeing what tasks are there and maybe being able to share those tasks, or maybe carry around a device that would help them with some of those tasks or to know where they are. And so I don't know that we've had any, the closest thing I can think of right now to success is digitizing work instructions in sow farms, where creating multilingual documents that can help people do things in a similar way. That's not super duper digital technical stuff, but it is a step in the right direction to using common work instructions. I think the next step would be to figure out how to make those faster and more accessible, maybe point of use type of things, which technology can help deliver those work instructions that way.
Yeah. Yeah, you talked a little bit about customer services as well. Do you feel like that customer service for products such as yours can be done mostly virtually, or are you going to need to be present on the farm to help producers implement and sustain these sorts of solutions?
Yeah, so I think what I was referring to there, Dr. Johnson, was just around how easy we need to make it for people, right? And so in this world, the remoteness is a reality. So we have devices on farms today that we're remotely managing. We can reboot, we can push updates, we can mimic their screens and see what they're seeing. So, those types of customer service elements are going to be, everybody's going to have to do that. We are not going to be able to run out to central Iowa and change out a tablet, right? So I think that's going to be imperative. And then, even for, prioritizing people's work, as you have a regional manager, you have these folks that have 100 barns, have lots of facilities and people that they're in charge of. Where do I go today, and enabling that customer service element even for them as they serve their constituency, and making it easy for them to do their daily work and prioritize that. I think that's what we're focused on.
Very good. Well, thank you for all that, Scott. Thank you guys for being a part of the event today. And I know just looking at the comments in the chat, there were a lot of people who really thought highly of your presentation. So thanks for the time.
Thank you.